A new season has begun, which means new players, new teams, new kits, new fans, new shows, but not new referees. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m, kind of every single morning. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for listening and dropping a like. I'm sure you have already. And really just help us to reach that 1K every single day target, of course, that we have on the channel. If you ever could be so kind to continue to do so. It's amazing how quickly and easily we forget we can slip. Yesterday, we just reached that 1,000 target. So let's keep this up for as long as feasibly possible. But thank you to you all joining us live in the chat box. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for doing so. Rob, we've got Tom, we've got Stuart, we've got other Rob, we've got Rich, we've got Kim, we've got Paul and other Paul, and other Paul. Paul and other Paul. So many polls. We got Steve and Amesy, another Steve. We got D. We got Gary, Shari in the chat box, Langdon, Mo. We got Keith. We got Martin and Zoom. We've got other Martin. We got Knowledge. By the way, being an other does not mean you're any less than the other, if that makes sense. Claire, good morning to you. To Cheech in the chat box as well. To Mike, to Ken, to Angela, good morning. Thank you so much to all of you for tuning in. Really appreciate your time and your generosity with it as well, especially on a Saturday. Saturdays and Sundays for us, always, of course, a little bit slower. People getting out of bed on a Saturday morning, I absolutely empathise and appreciate. Not everyone's up for that, but thank you so much to all of you for tuning in. Other Colin in the chat? No. And Arasilki, yeah, StreamYard's mugging people off. It's what it does. It's what it does. But Jamie, in his first ever live listen, gets a shout out. So thank you to you all. Thank you so much for listening. It was yesterday I had an interesting day, of course, with Mikel Arteta's first press conference of the brand new season, and certainly an exciting point to kind of get back into the swing and the routines of the previous campaign once again for the new season, and to see, of course, the Premier League kick off as well. And we need to talk about all of those things that happen. So let's start with Anfield, because Liverpool in the end needed rescuing, and it came from an unlikely source. They may yet find a Alexander Isak with them this season, although I would say that, Hugo Ekitike already getting underway and scoring, it almost feels a little bit counterintuitive for Liverpool to spend 100+ million quid on Isak when they've already got, Ekitike at the club, of course. I think they do need to bring in some depth in those areas, but Chiesa, of course, delivering here. Maybe that saves them some money, and they choose to spend that money more wisely on a Mark Guehi and maybe a defensive midfielder before the window closes. If I was in charge of Liverpool, I'd certainly be looking to do that. But they needed rescuing. They didn't look their usual selves. They did not look like the Liverpool of last season. It's probably fair to say they'd lost control of the game in certain moments. And I think Arsenal, despite them winning the game and scoring 2 late goals, will take encouragement. I think teams will take encouragement from that game. And seeing them score late on obviously is frustrating and annoying. And if you have to kind of put it into the Arsenal context, if we'd have gone from 2-up to 2-all, as we have, of course, seen on occasions before, and we saw it last season against Aston Villa, we falter, whereas Liverpool didn't, and came from those 2 goals that they conceded to find 2 late winners on the day. But in the game was, of course, some moments. Now, this refereeing 8-second rule, I don't know about you, but I feel like that wasn't followed in the game at all. First opportunity for us to see that 8-second rule applied, I counted 10 seconds on multiple occasions with the ball in the goalkeeper's hands. I was just testing out. I'm not going to do this for every game. I can't be asked, to be quite honest, but there was moments where there was goalkeepers on the ball for longer than 8 seconds. There was moments where the referee was approached by players who weren't the captain. Again, referees not applying the new rules, clearly. So let's see if they get applied to Arsenal on Sunday. Not only that, but I think there was 2 massive decisions in the game as well. Clear red cards for Senesi. This is a denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. Senesi loses the control of the ball. Ekitike would have a clean run through on goal if he can take the ball through. This is just a deliberate handball and a denial of a potential goal scoring opportunity. It's a red card and wasn't applied. Of course, I'll be saying this. I'm saying this here. It's a Bournemouth player that's guilty of this. But if this was against Arsenal, I'd be absolutely fuming. It's not an accident for me. He gets the ball, his arm goes into an unnatural position. You can see him make a play for the ball. I'm sorry, but if you personally feel like this is accidental, I don't believe that you would if he was wearing a Liverpool shirt. I honestly don't. I think you're letting the biases cloud your judgment, because there's nothing other than this being deliberate. In my opinion, it's so deliberate. He's clearly trying to stop the ball from going Ekitike, who would get a clean run through on goal. We've seen the likes of William Saliba sent off, for those denial of goal scoring opportunities from far away from the goal. If they're giving red cards there, it's a red card there. And VAR getting involved and not taking action, I thought was ridiculous, as was this blatant penalty. I think it's McAllister, just absolutely misses the ball, takes the Bournemouth player out in the box. It's a blatant penalty, and it's not given, and it's just madness. It's utter madness how this happens, how this just continues to every year. It's the same thing over and over again. Blatant moments aren't punished. Just not. It's maddening, isn't it? Really, it's absolutely maddening. Apparently there was the referee blowing his whistle at a certain time meant that the VAR wasn't looking at it, but it happened while the game was live. You can have a VAR review prior, to the referee's whistle being blown and the ball being dead. It was in play. It's a joke. It's just a joke. I feel like I've missed the Premier League. I've missed football. I really want to see football back. I really want football in my life again. And it's been a long summer, and a lot has happened, and a lot hasn't happened. And we've been kind of yearning for football. But it comes back, and it just kicks you between the legs. It really does, the refereeing in the Premier League. It just kicks you. You just know that we're going to get a season where it's going to be spoiled. The season is going to be spoiled by horrendous officiating. And in the first game, we've got two glaring mistakes, massive mistakes, and several examples of them not following their brand new rules. And the people behind the VAR who get the opportunity to look at these things back, I mean, what can we say? What can we say? It's a joke. Absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. Moving into today's Premier League games, where I'm sure we'll saw more examples of amazing officiating. Aston Villa take on Newcastle United in the early kickoff. Brighton take on Fulham at 3 o'clock in the first of 3 games at that embargoed time. Sunderland against West Ham is the second, and Tottenham against Burnley is the third. The late kickoff today is Wolves against Manchester City. So they are the games that are taking place on the opening Saturday of the Premier League. Lots of football going on down the Football League pyramid, of course. If you're able to get to games today, I recommend you do, because there's plenty of football to go and see if you can go and check it out. But let's jump to the big Arsenal story of yesterday, and that was, of course, Mikel Arteta's press conference, taking to the stage for the first time in a Premier League context this season. And he discussed a lot of really interesting topics. The press conference kicked off in a party-like fashion. I didn't think that the cameras were going to be on me as much as they were. I don't know if you have seen the video yesterday that was sent around by The Sun. Thanks, The Sun, for sending that video around. In my defense, were you laughing at home? Because I really had to hold in. Look, Gary Cottrell is a special individual who has produced some entertaining pieces of television for Sky. I wouldn't say, and I'll say, I said it to Gary when I saw him afterwards. I was like, "Do you think he liked it?" I struggled to keep composure in that moment. I'm not going to lie. It was hard to keep composure. When you see a balloon and a party popper coming out, is that a party streamer? I guess. Yeah, I struggled. I had Ed Aarons sitting next to me, and that you can see me turn to him and go, "Oh no, what's happening? What's happening right now?" It was a struggle to maintain my composure. I didn't laugh out loud, to be fair, and I nearly did. I did stifle it. The laugh was definitely stifled, but it was a challenge. As Gary's antics go, that was up there with one of the most intriguing, let's say, to be as polite to Gary as I can be. What a moment, and Arteta just the look on Mikel's face as well was just absolutely priceless to witness. Arsenal are red, United are too. It's Guy's biggest Premier League season ever. We're excited. Are you? To which he said, I'm super excited. I can't wait. It's been a really productive pre-season. We've made such an evolution in the squad as well, and we're ready to go. He was asked for team news, and of course, we got some updates about Leandro Trossard, to which he said, yeah, I think he's much better. I think he'll be able to train again tomorrow, and if that's the case, he will be fit. And of course, from the images and the photos that we saw throughout the day yesterday, Trossard was indeed present in the training photos and the training video as well. So positive to see Trossard back and in the group. So he should be available if he trains today against Man United tomorrow. And, with the way in which we've had some struggles on the left-hand side, it's good that we've got as many options as we can. Alex Howe from BBC asked Arteta about Martin Zubimendi as well, because, of course, he was not present for the photos on media day. And that was a bit of a concern. And I'd heard some rumours that he'd been somewhat under the weather, which I believe was also somewhat confirmed. But Arteta said that he's had a great integration. Everybody can witness immediately a very big impact, and we're really happy. And he will be fit. He said that he will be fit, and photos and videos yesterday did show that Zubimendi was in training yesterday, and hopefully will train again today as well. So hopefully he's shaken off whatever it was that meant that he couldn't take part in media day, and that he'll be fine for the game at the weekend. Transfers wise, and specifically, kind of wasn't really anything on transfers. I'll be honest with you, it wasn't. I mean, there's not a lot going on. To be fair, in the world of transfers for Arsenal right now, that could change. But he was asked by Gary, who said, "I'm not going to ask you, maybe others will, whether you're planning to bring anybody else in, but is the main emphasis now potentially on trying to get a few players out?" He said, "I'll leave that to Andrea and the club. My main focus is just on performing, preparing the games in the best possible way, and winning, because now we've started the season. It's been a long off-season, pre-season with the market and being so active on it, and I'll leave it to them." There was also a question from James McNicholas from The Athletic, which kind of hinted about Eber Eze. James says, "You mentioned Ethan Nwaneri. I think it was mentioned earlier he signed a new contract. Are you happy with that with Ethan, Martin, Mikel Merino, and maybe with Kai, that you have enough in the attacking midfield part of the position?" And Mikel said, "Yeah, I think we have great versatility, very different qualities in relation to the opposition as well. And we can manipulate that and have some great cohesion within those units." So very happy with that as well. The other theme of the press conference, of course, was the captaincy debate. Tony Adams, as you will well know, because we talked about it on the show, said that Arsenal could not win the Premier League with Martin Odegaard as their captain, and that Mikel Arteta had to make a big decision in taking the armband off him and giving it to Declan Rice. Gary Cottrell asked Arteta about this. He said, "Tony Adams is obviously a bit of a hero at Arsenal. He's been saying that he believes that with Martin as your captain, you won't win the Premier League, but Declan should be the captain. Obviously, that's his opinion. What are your thoughts on that?" And he said, "Well, my opinion is clear, and it's not just my opinion. It's all the staff, and especially the players. I asked them to vote the captain, and I got the result yesterday, and by a mile away, by a big 100 miles, everybody choosing the same person, which is Martin Odegaard, which is the most clear sign that you can have. It's how they feel about who has to be their captain to defend, improve, and win the matches that we want to win. So I think there's no question about that." Now, James Benn from CBS also asked Arteta about the vote and said, "You mentioned there's a vote. Is that something that happens every season?" and within that are their vice captains. And he said, especially because we can change a lot the leadership groups, because a lot of the players that were there now, they're now gone, and we need to reestablish that again, because it gives you so much information, really how they feel about themselves, how they see them as a leader, and how they see the people that can join that leadership group. So it was really interesting to analyze all the data and to gather information. And James pressed him on the Tony Adams point a bit further and said, obviously, Tony Adams is going to have a very particular view and a particular experience of what a captain is. And maybe his style of leadership is quite different to Martin's. But is it, and do you see what captaincy values in Martin? He says, yeah, well, we see all different, and we see it different, and we're going to talk about leadership and the kind of leaders we can have. So we'd be here for hours. So at the end, what matters the most is how these guys feel about who needs to lead them, how they feel comfortable, who is going to push them, who is going to give them to support when it's happening. Basically, who do you want to represent the club and the team when we go out there and face any opposition? That's key. So there's been a clip going around from what I think was the embargoed section. I've seen that clip go around on social media where Arteta has been talking about kind of what goes on behind closed doors. I won't read it because, as I say, it's not it's not meant to be out there at the moment. It's a Saturday 10:30 embargo. So, but he does go on in the embargoed section to talk about a little bit further the captaincy, and I recommend you go and check that quote out when you get a opportunity, because again, he kind of really does put it to Arteta. He puts it to Tony Adams really about the captaincy, and it's very, very interesting. I think it was 10:30 tonight. It might have been 10:30 last night. I might have that wrong, but I'm not going to make the mistake. I'm not going to. I'm not going to get it wrong and assume it was last night, 10:30 last night. But it might have been 10:30 yesterday. I'm not. I can't remember. I focus on my work focuses around the broadcast section, so I don't have to pay attention too much to that. But I will leave it for now. But you can, I'm sure, find it elsewhere. But when it comes to those comments, I think there is a very, 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 very important aspect to consider. And that is this idea of a vote. Now, I find it really, really intriguing, really interesting that they do it in this way, in this fashion. I thought that what Arteta provided in that press conference was such a strong kind of response and a really big backing. The embargo was 10:30 last night. I've just double checked it, so that you'll find to check out that. And in fact, it means that we can go back and watch that. We can go back and actually look at the exact quote that Arteta gives on Odegaard as well. So we'll see if we can find the exact quote for you at some point. I'm doing a lot of searching this hour at the moment, trying to find things. But it's very, very interesting. I thought how strong he was on it, in my opinion. And I did an interview with Haters after the press conference as well, where James St. Dennis was asking me some questions about it. And I said what I said on here. In all honesty, I think that it's nonsense what Tony Adams said. With all due respect, I think it's nonsense. This idea that Arsenal, the difference between them winning the league and not winning the league is Odegaard having the captaincy. I think it's madness that these are quotes that are coming out, right before the start of the Premier League season. Yes, he hasn't had, he's been asked the question. It's not a case of he's chosen to come out and say these things spontaneously. He's been asked the question. But I think it's absolutely mad that in those moments you choose to kind of be that scathing. You could absolutely kind of turn around and be like, if you've got the opinion you don't think Odegaard should be the captain, you can say anything other than that, to the effect of he should have the captaincy taken off him and Arsenal aren't going to win the league. He crossed, I think he went beyond the line that, from a perspective of a former Arsenal captain, I felt comfortable hearing. And I get that there are a lot of fans that agree with Tony Adams. I personally think you're wrong, and I give a very strong explanation as to why, as we have done the last few shows, but it creates more division taking the armband off a player than it does giving emphasis to players in the group to be the captain. And not only that, I love the fact that Arteta got to kind of clap back with that vote, that all the players in the group, you got some kind of, I think, hollow views that the idea that, well, they're not going to vote against their mate. I'm sorry. Have you seen society in 2025? If people aren't happy about something, democracy clearly is working because people are voting when they're not happy about things. People give their opinions. People aren't afraid to vote and give their views on something. If someone's not happy, especially footballers, they're not going to be afraid to give their opinion. I'm assuming the vote was also done anonymously. It wouldn't really make sense if it wasn't done anonymously either. And the fact that it was absolutely unanimous and he said that everyone was voting for Odegaard is very telling. There was a really good video, I think, that also re-emerged from a couple of seasons ago where Odegaard's doing an interview with broadcast and Saliba, you can hear Saliba shouting off in the background, "That's my captain." He is so well liked, so well respected in the group. Like this idea of an old English captain, traditional being Declan Rice, this idea that the captain of Arsenal has to be English or has to be a shouty, traditional person. There's no suggestions that Odegaard shouts any less than Rice. Being in the ground, if anything, I hear Odegaard shouting more than Rice on a match day. I see him being more vocal than Rice on a match day. And I don't think that's because Rice feels he can't be vocal because he hasn't got the armband. He also shouts too. He also is vocal. But I don't see him being any more vocal than Odegaard or Odegaard being any less vocal than Rice. I just think it's a really moot point, and it's created a discussion and it's created this distraction days before the Premier League season. I just don't think it was very shrewd of Adams to to come out with such a blunt statement so close to the start of the campaign. You know, is that really what we expect from a former Arsenal captain to be coming out and saying such things right ahead of the start of the season? I don't think that's particularly captain-like, personally. Everyone's entitled to their view, but I just think the timing of it is really poor. Really, really poor. But we move on and go further into the press conference as well. There was a really interesting point where Arteta actually gets something wrong, which I wanted to highlight. He was asked a question. He said, "You've always said in the past as well that no one puts more pressure on you than yourself. But do you feel after having come close 3 times now, knocking on the door for a title, that this season really is the most pressure on you and your team?" And I think that was, it was Ian Abrahams from TalkSport that asked that question. And he says, "Yeah, you keep digging, and you have to keep digging because one day the gold is going to be there," which I thought was a good quote, to be fair. That's all the time. However, then he says, "When I've been taught, when I've been educated, and that's it. For 3 seasons, we've had more points than any other team in this league, which is incredible. That's how you all have that's how you have all the consistency. Now we have to do it in a season to have 1 more point or the same amount of points or more goal difference than any other team. That's the objective." What Arteta said there isn't true. In the last 3 seasons, Arsenal have accumulated 247 points. Manchester City have accumulated 251 points. We sat in the press room afterwards and I was like, if it's true, it's quite impressive. But I feel as though with Man City winning 2 titles and not finishing too many points off Arsenal last season, I would have been surprised if that was true. And it turned out not to be true. So it's a shame because the digging for gold quote was really, really good. But he followed it up with with a mathematical statement that was incorrect, which wasn't great. I hope someone kind of points that out to Mikel quite quickly, so he doesn't keep using it over and over and over again. I think it's just a mistake, and I think someone's probably told him that in good faith and has got it wrong. But yeah, it wasn't a great line because it's something that now obviously stands out as being an incorrect fact being given. The last thing I want to talk about is utterly and entirely selfish because it's my questions from the press conference. I asked Mikel when we spoke to you in the Premier League context, we were sitting in the room in St Mary's and you talked about how you're going to go away and reflect. I'm kind of curious about what you're willing to share and what reflections did you take and what have you learned going into this new season. He said, well, there's a long list of things. First of all, with the amount of situations we have to deal with, I think the team showed an incredible capacity to adapt and win a lot of matches in very different contexts and something that is not common. And I revised that in the last Premier League for the 20 years and what happened. After that, how we have to evolve as well. The squad, the individuals, certain roles have changed and it's the moment to move away from that And then what is the real deal? What are the things that we have to do to continue or to do better to give us the best possible chance to win the major trophies? And that's clear. And I thought I'd already planned what I was going to ask in my second question. And I was really happy that he used the word evolve in that first answer, because I said he used that word evolve there. And against Athletic Club in the pre-season friendly, the midfield, I noticed a particular evolution, the way in which Declan Rice and Zubimendi were moving around in the middle third. Do you see that midfield evolution being perhaps the most key to Arsenal taking the next forward step? And he said, well, there's a few in relation to the players that we have and their qualities. Now we have probably elements and possibilities that we never had before, and some others that will emerge naturally that are probably not in the book. So that's a really good weapon to have. So I kind of hoped he would have gone more in detail, but I guess ahead of a big game, he's not going to divulge too much about tactics. But I do think it was interesting kind of how he talked about evolution unprompted and then is discussing this idea of taking Arsenal to that next level. And taking things forwards in that position. I think the midfield evolution is going to be the most important part. You can look at Gyökeres, you can look at Madueke and how they might change the attack, but I think it's how Arsenal transition and the speed in which they move the ball up the field, the way in which they use more freedom in the midfield with Odegaard and Zubimendi and Rice in order to give us more freedom on the left-hand side. I think there's so much that comes from Arsenal's midfield this season. I think it's so important that we move into those positions and become a lot more unpredictable and become more threatening as a result as well. And I think that comes from that part of the field as well. So yeah, that was the press conference. And I thought it was a good press conference. And I'm sure there's a lot, of course, if you want to read every single word from that press conference and every single word from the questions as well, I'd do the transcript from those press conferences and we put them on the football.london website. But I also try and transcribe every word of the questions as well, because I know that sometimes you get kind of transcripts of press conferences and the questions have kind of been condensed and consolidated. I put every single word that I've heard into the question transcript as well on the FL website. So if you want to read every single word of a press conference from the Arsenal side of things this season, you can go and do that on the football.london website. So you can read every single word from the broadcast section. Of course, I should stress in that, and the embargoed section you can go and watch over on Haters. So go over there and watch it as well. There's also an interview of an Arsenal player coming out, I think tonight. So look out for that on your preparation for the game tomorrow in the morning as well. Some good quotes from one of the players coming out later as well. So I look forward to discussing that with you all too. Right, let's go to part 2 and plenty more right after this. Right, let's move into part 2, which of course is in your interests because it is your time to throw questions into the chat box. So let's go, shall we, and tackle some of these thoughts. Matt G kicks us off, says, Tom, now that you've called Arteta out for being a liar, I didn't say he's a liar. I said he's mistaken. That's what I've said. He's just mistaken in the statistics. He says, do you and your family have to go into hiding? # pray for Tom. No, I don't think so. I think I'll be fine. I don't know if it will get asked to him. I don't know if I will ask him about it, but it's one of those where I just think it's gonna. I hope it doesn't come back to bite him, but yeah, it's just one of those mistakes, isn't it? It's just mistakenly got a statistic wrong about Arsenal, but I wonder if it's brought up in Pep Guardiola's press conference. I assume it wasn't, because I think it probably would have been done yesterday, won't it? But because they play today, but be curious if that's ever brought up again. Very curious. Maximia says, Tom, what is the role of a football team captain in today's scenario? Outside of the coin toss, exchanging the flags and speaking to the referee, how influential in the changing of the mood of the team? I think the role of a captain, as opposed to, say, what it was 20, 30 years ago, is different. There's a very different vibe about a football team these days. Footballers are very different people, I think, these days. There's core similarities, of course, but I think the individuality of footballers has changed. The profile of footballers has changed, and that requires a very different type of leader in that group. It requires somebody who does command respect, which clearly Martin Odegaard does, by the way in which he's obviously got that vote unanimously or in its entirety, as Arteta tells us, from what they undertook yesterday, not just of the players that are already in the group, but Arsenal, of course, you've got to remember, have added 6 brand new players into the team. And those 6 brand new players, according to Arteta, as he says, in their entirety have voted for Odegaard as well. But their role is to be an example. Their role is to take on a lot of responsibility, to shield your players in some ways from some of the flack, and to speak more regularly, I think, in interviews and press conferences and mix zones. Particularly, I tended to speak to Odegaard when I did the mix zone interviews a lot after Arsenal hadn't won games. It can be quite difficult to get players to speak up after Arsenal haven't won a game. Players aren't particularly in the mood to do those types of interviews. I don't particularly blame them, even though it's a frustrating thing for us as journalists to have to deal with. But Odegaard often did step up in a lot of those really difficult moments to speak on behalf of the team as the club captain. And I think spoke very well. You've heard a lot of those interviews, of course, that I've done with Martin. And I think that he represents Arsenal. I think he represents also the ideas of the manager on the field. I think that's a really important thing. I think the captain, from a philosophical footballing standpoint, has to realise the plan tactically, intelligently of the manager onto the field. He is effectively the manager in the team. Back in the day, management was far less tactical. It was far less technical. It was far less detailed. Fast forward 20 years, the way in which technology has moved on, coaching has moved on, it is a very different vibe, management, coaching these days. And that's why, unfortunately, managers that had great success, like Sir Alex Ferguson, for instance, but more so, I think that Arsene Wenger is a better example, that their ideas became outdated and football evolved beyond them. And football and coaching in particular has evolved to new levels and to new heights. And I think that the captain, being Odegaard, has to try and deliver that. And I think, obviously, we've seen with Odegaard as our captain, Arsenal rise once again to becoming one of the most competitive teams, one of the most competitively viable sides in the world. Hence why they have finished so consistently at the top end of the table and now are reaching the latter stages of cup competitions as well on a regular basis. 2 semi-finals last season, quarter-final the season before, of course, as well, and finishing second place for the last 3 seasons. So I think that's a lot about the captaincy and how that's translated in 2025 as opposed to kind of what it was before. And I think Odegaard encapsulates that. Let's do Vacan, who says, don't our club legends have access to the club and tell Arteta what they think directly instead of messing around and creating division? I mean, yes, they have access to the club. But that access, people kind of get confused about access to Arsenal. I get accused of it a lot. This idea that if you have access to Arsenal, access to press conferences, access to interviews, access to players, access to whatever, that you have to somehow censor what you really think. I've never had to censor what I really think. I've never not said how I really feel about anything regarding Arsenal. I've never had any pushback from any criticisms that I've had. I've been asked questions about what I think about things from people at the club that are contacts of mine, that I've built relationships and, contacts with over the years. And I give them very honest feedback whenever I have to have a conversation, or whether they want to have a conversation about anything. And I never feel like I'm ever having to hold back my opinion on any topic. So I really do think that this idea about access, Tony Adams is not, shouldn't, in my opinion, be, stopped from going to games, stopped from having a place in maybe the director's box if he wants to go and watch, or at club level or whatever. And I'd be very surprised if he was, even after these comments, which are scathing and I think do cross a line. I think they do go too far. They are just his opinion, but I think they go too far and I think it's really poorly timed. But I still expect to see Tony Adams amongst, the club's kind of well looked after people, that when they want to go games, they can go to games and stuff like that. And still very much respected person within that community too. It's an opinion. It's just someone's opinion. So, yeah, this whole idea about access, and things like that, if you start to curb that, if you start to censor that, if you start to stop people from having their opinion, in the sense that if you speak negatively or critically, that you're going to lose access, you're going to lose your ability to go to games, you're going to lose your ability to go into a press conference or watch a match as a guest of the club, then you start to impede upon what really are just people's rights to have an opinion. Freedom of speech is important. Freedom from scrutiny is something that never ever should exist. You should be scrutinized for opinions, and there should be consequences if you take things too far. But I don't think what Tony Adams has said, while I think is incorrect, I don't think it's requiring of consequence, like access being taken away. I don't think. I think that's a dangerous precedent when you start doing things like that. I think you set a really dangerous precedent on that when you start to take away access from people for having an opinion. I mean, look at Arsenal Fan TV, pre-season in the summer, given access to the pre-season. They're in the mix zone. They're asking questions to the players. They're in the press conferences. You know, obviously during the Premier League season, you need to have media accreditation. So pre-season is more open, and they've not been turned down. But think about the things that have been said on that platform, you know, by people that have gone onto that platform, have been published on that platform, but they're given access. So it's important to not ban, you know, banning people, you know, I think it sets a dangerous precedent. So, yeah, I don't think the access of the likes of Tony Adams for what he said should be impeded because of his scathing and, in my opinion, incorrect opinion about the captaincy of Arsenal. Let's scroll a little bit more and get some of the others. Wow, Cash, you can get banned for being abusive in the chat box. That's incredible. Goodness me, grow up, mate. AFCDMB says he was asked a question. He answered the question. He's allowed an opinion like everyone else. Just because it's not the answer you don't like doesn't make him wrong. I mean, in my opinion, he's wrong. And I explain why he's wrong. I think he's wrong because his opinion, if it were to become reality, would create more problems than it would solve problems. It would create more division. It would unsettle the group. And I think that ultimately what Arteta has done by putting the emphasis on the players to decide their captain is the most unifying thing he could do. I think he would select Odegaard anyway, but the fact he's given that emphasis to the players to do shows that unity, shows that togetherness, shows that respect that Odegaard clearly commands, and proves the point that he should be the captain. It proves that point because clearly the players that want somebody to look up to, somebody to lead them towards trophies, they wouldn't vote for somebody if they didn't think that person was the right person to lead them towards what they want to achieve. Footballers are selfish. Footballers are ambitious. Footballers want to win at all costs. If they felt like the person who was leading them towards those ultimate goals was not the right person, they'd say something and they wouldn't vote for them. So it's really important to point that out. Kevin says, shout out to Gabriel Barbosa. And by the way, just a second ago, so you might go, you're just talking about not banning people, but you just banned someone. Yeah, there's a difference between banning someone for an opinion and banning someone for being abusive. This is what we talk about, the difference between freedom of speech and freedom from scrutiny. You're entitled to your opinion. If you're going to be abusive and disrespectful, we don't deal with that here. And so you can go. But I don't think anyone's been disrespectful. I don't think Tony Adams has been disrespectful. I don't think he's been abusive. I think he's probably taken it a little far in terms of his view and especially the timing of it. But there's a difference between that. So I want to clarify that, obviously, after the back of what we just did there. Chaz says, Odegaard is a player a lot of the younger players can look to and talk to, given the spotlight at their ages as well. Respectfully, that's a really important point. Deal says, this fan base loves Arteta more than the club. No one person is ever bigger than Arsenal Football Club, period. And if Arsenal Football Club is going in the wrong direction, then that's when you need to make decisions. And if Arsenal Football Club is going in the right direction, the person who is in the front of all that is the manager. And they tend to be the person that ends to be changed. Now, I don't believe Arsenal are going in the wrong direction. I believe Arsenal have been going in the right direction for a long time and continue to do so. Hence why I'm more than happy for Arteta to continue as manager. But this idea that just because somebody has a different opinion to you and somebody wants Arteta to continue means that they love him more than the club, I think's not only wrong, but again, I think it's a slightly arrogant opinion. Someone can have a different opinion to you and they can hold that different opinion that you have. It doesn't mean that they have an agenda. It doesn't mean that they have some kind of ulterior motive. And it doesn't mean they love Arteta more than Arsenal. It just doesn't stand up, that point of view. It doesn't stand up. No, they just have a different opinion to what you do. If you don't particularly rate Arteta, that's fine. If you can justify that, fair play to you. I've personally never heard a justification to get rid of him so far that actually stands up to scrutiny. So I don't agree that people who just want Arteta still here, love him more than Arsenal. No one person is bigger than Arsenal Football Club. And every decision that should be made for the betterment of this club, regardless of who stays or who has to go. It's as simple as that. That's how football works. That's how businesses work. That's how sport should work. Akers says, this talk about giving the captain armband to Rice doesn't make sense to me because firstly, he just got here. Secondly, it doesn't make us magically compete better. And thirdly, there are others ahead of him as well. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Rice is not the obvious pick for everybody. Some people argue that Gabriel should be captain. I'm sure some people argue because of the seniority and length of time he's been in the first team that Bukayo Saka should be somebody that potentially should have the armband instead. Some people might argue that David Raya would be a good person to be the club captain. Some people might say anybody else. You know, it's not like it's obviously Declan Rice that should be the captain instead. And as I say, in my opinion, in my view, taking the captaincy off someone now at this point, going into the new season, ahead of a really important season, would just create so much little ambition. So much division. And it would, I think, take away from ambition as well. And Jason points out that Xhaka was given the captaincy at Sunderland, and that's their decision. That's their choice. You can choose to do that. You know, and I don't know the Sunderland situation. I don't know the scenario with the captain. I don't know if the captain from last season, if he's still there. I don't know. You'll know probably more than I will. It doesn't mean that because it happens somewhere else that it should happen here. You know? And there might be stronger arguments. Those contexts are different. The teams are different. The scenarios are different. So just because it happens somewhere else doesn't mean that it should happen here, or that if it's successful somewhere else, that it should happen and would be successful here. You know, Xhaka is an incredibly experienced player coming into a team that are playing Premier League football for the first time in an incredibly long time. It's just a different scenario. But again, I don't really know the difference between the two, to be honest. I don't agree that if Rice is given the captaincy, that players would leave. I don't think that would happen. I think that takes things a bit far. But I think it would create some division initially and would take a little bit of time to heal those wounds. And I don't think it's worth doing that. I don't think it's worth taking a short-term hit for a potential long-term gain in this example, in this stage of Arsenal's progression. If you look at the start of Arteta's tenure, we took a short-term hit in terms of what we did, and we ended up dropping to 8th on a couple of seasons for a long-term gain of re-establishing Arsenal as one of the most competitive teams in the world again. And I fell into the trap of thinking that short-term hit was enough to think that that it wasn't working. Clearly, I was wrong, and clearly we've been proven wrong because it is working. But yeah, it's just very, very difficult to look at that. Dan says, what even made people feel Rice should be captain? Oh, again, it's. I think people have held the opinion that the captaincy isn't necessarily in the right possession of Odegaard. A fair few people hold that opinion, and clearly Tony Adams as well. But it's these comments and these quotes that have come out and now been sent to the manager that has kind of elevated and emphasized this theme and this discussion to a greater level. Is where we're at. Vacan says, I'm not saying access that they get restricted from games and have to sense their opinion, but in the sense that they could speak to Arteta directly instead of speaking through the media. Well, it wasn't like he sought out the opportunity. From my understanding, he was asked a question and he gave an honest answer. He gave his honest opinion. He could have thought a bit harder, in my opinion, about the context, what it would do saying it. You know, he's chosen to give his opinion, which he's entitled to. But thinking, if I was in his shoes as a former Arsenal captain, thinking about when this is going to go out, knowing the stature you have, knowing that it's going to go out ahead of the start of a Premier League season, I would have probably thought twice about being so blunt. Not just saying that you feel that Declan Rice should be captain, but going as far as to say that you feel that categorically that is the difference between Arsenal winning and not winning a Premier League title. That's what I think that took things too far. I don't think it's too far to say that you think somebody else is more deserving or is more appropriate for the captaincy, but to categorically turn around and say that the difference between Arsenal winning and not winning a title, despite the fact they finished just 2 points off City in 23-24, broke records, broke his Invincible team's winning record and the number of goals they scored, I find it a bit strange. I just find it a bit. I say his, obviously he wasn't in that team, but the teams that, of course, he played in the titles from 02 and 98, but the team that succeeded him in 03, 04 exceeded what Adams achieved with Arsenal as well. So, I just think it's really poorly timed. Could be says, in my opinion, he's never in any way wrong to give out the handout. He still deserves that role as our captain. Let him continue as the captain. He's a cool personality. Patrick says it was a paid audience event in Dublin. I don't think Tony knew it was even being recorded, but still unfortunate timing. Yeah. I think, again, you might not know it's being recorded, but in 2025, every person on the planet nearly, in the developed world at least, and many in the undeveloped world, have access to video recording equipment within 2 seconds of their person at all times, usually within their pocket. And anything can be recorded. Even when things are told not to be recorded, things are going to be recorded. I think you've just got to have the foresight to recognize that what you say on a stage in front of a lot of people on a microphone, there's capacity for that to be recorded. So I have to work to that standard when I do these shows. It's everything I say here is going to be on record, and you have to think about that. So we're not perfect, and that's why I say I don't think he should be chastised for it. I don't think he should lose access for it. I don't think he should be punished for it. I don't think anything crazy like that should happen. But I just think it's poorly timed. I think the scrutiny is fair. The scrutiny of the opinion is fair. That's where I'm at on that one. Let's go to Jean says, you can't have seen a lot of Arsenal matches if you don't see how vocal Odegaard is. Remember how he took Lokonga once when Lokonga didn't follow directions, and Lokonga hasn't ever played since that. Like, that was a really famous kind of example of when Odegaard took a player aside in the public eye and gave them a bit of a dressing down for not following their duties. But yeah, Real Robert says he said it before the Bilbao game. It didn't upset the team one bit, and that's what I mean. Like, it didn't necessarily mean that it was going to. It doesn't matter. The focus of it has come out now, and it's not to say that it would have an impact, but it's the chance of it having an impact that's the problem. It's the chance. And I know, Robert, that you personally feel that Tony was right in his opinion. I know that from comments you've left on the channel, but I don't agree with you. And I personally agree that the opinion is scrutinised. I think that the scrutiny of the opinion is correct. And fair play for Arteta for biting back to it as well. Ayuke says, could it be that he didn't convert his message correctly? I believe he was trying to refer to the difference in mentality. Odegaard seems a bit more relaxed while Rice... Again, this would be fine, but it was the point he made about Arsenal cannot... He said it in an absolute. Arsenal cannot win the title with Odegaard as captain. It was that absolute. If he'd explained it around like the traits and qualities that Rice has in comparison to Odegaard as to why he feels that Rice should be captain, no problem. But to come out and say that you think categorically Arsenal cannot win the title, that takes things too far for me. It takes things beyond just having, an opinion about who the captain should be. That it comes across quite poor, I think, in that sense. Seth says our captain has one not so good season, and we start to bash him like he didn't try. He's the best. Would the same be said if our star boy had a similar season as well? And Saka didn't have the best season last season, mainly impacted by injury. The irony being, and he didn't particularly finish the season too well. Saka, he scored in the Bernabeu, and that was kind of the big highlight of the end of Saka's campaign. He didn't have a great season after he returned from injury, barring that kind of key fixture. Missed a huge chance, of course, in the PSG game that could have been really important in the part of the plans. And his season was affected by that serious injury. Odegaard had a big injury. He was out for 2 months at the start of the season and then had illness at another key point of the season towards Christmas and missed more of the season and actually had to play through that. And clearly it was kind of affecting him. And the view of Saka, I think, is obviously very different to the view of Odegaard, clearly. And this is an Odegaard that's up there with, I think, very few players that have managed to score 15 Premier League goals from midfield. I don't think there's many that have managed to do that. I think it's on par with De Bruyne's record. So, yeah, it is a bit odd. It is a bit strange. let's scroll a little bit more. He says, when we win the title with Odegaard as captain, maybe we should replace Tony's statue with one of Martin. I wouldn't go that far. I don't think so. We have to appreciate the achievements of Tony Adams at Arsenal. What Tony Adams achieved with Arsenal was brilliant. He helped bring Arsenal back into relevancy himself as well. In the 70s, moving into the 80s, Arsenal, they picked up a couple of trophies, but kind of fell away. And for a lot of the 80s, it was like that as well. And then in 1989, when Arsenal go on and win the league, with Tony Adams playing a massive part, of course, in that. And then, of course, again, helping them win further titles under George Graham and Arsene Wenger in the 90s and into the early 2000s, of course, with the 2001-2002 season. You've got to respect that achievement. I know that it was tongue-in-cheek, D. I know that was satirical, your comment, but and you say as much there too. But sometimes people just say silly things. Some people just say, I don't agree with a lot with what Thierry Henry says, for an example. Thierry Henry is probably, in my money, the best player to ever play for Arsenal, the greatest player to ever play for Arsenal. Doesn't mean I have to agree with everything he says about Arsenal. I don't personally agree with everything Thierry Henry says, and that's fine, because we're all allowed our opinions. We're all allowed to be entitled to those views. And as long as they're done respectfully, as long as you're not abusing people or disrespecting people, you are entitled to that view. You are entitled to be critical. You are entitled to be praising. You're entitled to have that point. As soon as you cross that line into what's disrespectful, and I don't think that Tony Adams was disrespectful, I just think he took it a little bit too far. I don't think he crossed the line into what was abusive or disrespectful. I just think he took it a bit far to suggest that Arsenal couldn't win the title with him as captain. I just think that's silly. It's just a silly view, in my opinion. But it's just this idea that your stature or your history or your accolades or your attachment or your cult hero status to Arsenal means that everything you say should be agreed with. That's rubbish. That's not true. It's just not. That's just not how it works. So there you go. Raz says, no, I don't see Odegaard being vocal. I see him flick his hair a lot and have to have the crowd make more noise. He wants the crowd to make more noise. Turn one of too many draws and wins, the crowds will cheer. I don't know if you... Maybe it's the fact, and I don't know you. When you're in the ground, you hear him all the time. I don't know if it's a case of you're not at games, and maybe you are, and maybe if you are able to go to games, maybe just pay a little bit more closer attention to Odegaard. But if you're there, and it is easy when you're there, it's not like I'm saying anyone that goes to a game has a more valid opinion. It's just environment. If you're at the game, you can hear Odegaard. But even when I'm not at the game, you can hear him. But when you're in the ground at the Emirates among 60,000 people, and I can hear Odegaard shouting, that's quite telling. So you're wrong. It's not an opinion. It's just reality. That's just a fact. He does shout. He is very vocal. And there's evidence of that. Go to the games, you'll see it. So again, that's not an opinion. That's just a statement. It's just true. AFC Matt says, hi, Tom. Hope you're well. Do you think Max Dowman could be in the matchday squad tomorrow, as he wasn't involved with the under-21s last night? And if so, who drops out to make way for Max? It's a great question, because we have a lot of players at the moment in the squad, and you can only take 20 into that match day. So looking at the team right now, we've got Raya, Kepa, Saliba, Mosquera, Ben White, Gabriel, Timber, Kivior, Zinchenko, Calafiori, Lewis Skelly, that's 11, Odegaard, Norgard, Vieira, Waneri, Marino, that's 16, Lokonga, Zubimendi, Rice, Saka, Martinelli, 21, Gyökeres, Trossard, Madueke, Reece Nelson, Havertz, 26, and obviously Gabriel Jesus is injured right now, and Carl Hein, I think, would be third choice, obviously, at the moment, and with Tommy Setford as well, you could argue too. So 26, not including Jesus. That means 6 of the players I've just listed are not going to be in the squad. Now, I think that includes Nelson. I don't think will be there. I don't think that... And that's not including Dowman, by the way, either. So if we put Dowman 27, we've got to fit him in. So 7 players to get Dowman in the squad of the list I've just read out won't be in the matchday squad. That kind of tells you how big our squad is right now. It's quite telling, isn't it? So, yeah, let's say we've got to pick 7 players, not including Dowman, from the list I've just said there that aren't going to go in the squad if we want Dowman to be in it. So, Nelson is 1. Lokonga is 2. Vieira is 3. I didn't see Norgard in any of the training images or the video. So, maybe Norgard's not there. So maybe we say Norgard, but we'll get to him in a minute. We'll still stay on 3. Zinchenko, 4. And now I need 3 more. So let's say Norgard's not there, 5. I need 2 more. Do we say Trossard because he wasn't yet fit? Do we say Mikel Marino? Do we say Kivior? Mosquera? It's hard. It's really difficult. And that's like this pining for Arsenal to go and sign that 7th edition this summer. I get it. I want it. I want that. I want an Eze. I'd love to sign Eze. But if you want Dowman in the group as well, we've got to leave 7 players currently who are at the team, not including Jesus. If Jesus was fit, it would be 8. You can only have a 25-man squad. That's nuts. So yeah, I don't know. Very, very difficult indeed to know whether or not to know whether or not that's the case. Is that actually Charles? I don't think Charles has ever said miss you to me before. So is that really you? Charles, if that's you, WhatsApp me now. So I want to know if someone's impersonating you. Is it? I'm gonna WhatsApp Charles right now. Actually, he's not saved my phone as Charles. He's saved in my phone as Wiles. Wiles chats. Is that you in my chat box? Or is it an imposter? Is it an imposter pretending to be Charles? Let's take a photo. There we go. Is that you, Charles? I want to know. Matt says it's defo Charles. It's bot Charles Watts. It says a Lodi. It could be bot Charles Watts. I wonder if it's really him. Let's see. Stop WhatsApping me. See, that makes me think it's not him. That makes me think it's not, because he's not read it and he's not online on WhatsApp. I think we might have a bot Watts. Is it bot Watts? Bot Watts in the chat. Hashtag bot Watts. You can get that going. Yeah, great. Hashtag bot Watts. Love it. Someone's got too much time on their hands if that's true. Oh, he's read the message. Let's see if it's him. I'm really curious if it is. Earl says, why is it TalkSport have nothing but positive and good things about all the other Premier League attacking signings, but start a negative narrative about Gyökeres being a flop? I think this comes from what's his name? Troy Deeney. I think Troy Deeney said it or something like that. I think obviously you got to be careful of kind of generalizing. And ultimately, we're on the TalkSport fan network from our audio side of things, and I have plenty of good things to say. So I don't think you can generalize. So be specific about who it is, so that's important. Okay, fair enough. Like Charles has replied. Oh dear. The thing is now, I'm so mistrusting. I'm so mistrusting that there's part of me that thinks he's making this up and he's just playing along with it now. Says, I can't believe you don't trust me. I do miss you. So, I don't know. I'm completely torn. Well, hopefully Charles is going to be on the show next week, so you can answer that yourself. Warza says going to be using that under his video. He might be. If he addresses it in his inside Arsenal show to Inside Gooner. Inside Arsenal, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Inside Arsenal show, then we'll see. make sure you're going over and subscribing to Charles's channel. He does some brilliant stuff. If you're not subscribed to his Patreon as well, he does some brilliant extra stuff as well. He's got a dedicated show with Sam Dean, who's off at the moment. Massive congratulations to Sam Dean, of course, on the birth of his child. Make sure you're sending Sam plenty of kind words and congratulations. And of course, Simon Collins, most recent one they did with Art de Roche. You can go and check that out if you are a Patreon listener over at Charles, like I am. It makes me blooming pay for it. Incredible. I think I bought him we went for a lovely Turkish dinner the other week, a few weeks ago now, but still makes me pay for his Patreon. Unbelievable. Kieran says, Tom, as a residential raver, I'm off to Chase and Status today. A friend of mine's going there, Kieran, today as well. Have a nice time. Enjoy it. We're nearly on the hour mark for today's show. Incredible. Antonelli says, how delightful it would be if we could embarrass Man United tomorrow. Yeah, I'll be there at Old Trafford tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Really can't wait to get back into the swing of Arsenal. We'll, of course, be doing a show tomorrow. My train is a little bit later on in the morning, so we can do a show. We'll be doing our preview, doing our lineup, getting your predictions, of course, ahead of the game. So I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. As always, thank you to the over 1,400 of you that are watching live today. Really appreciate all of you listening and tuning in. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Stay safe. Stay well. Stay happy and respectful. Enjoy the football. Premier League is back. And so is the officiating. Stay safe. Stay well. And all that usual stuff. I think I've said it already. But And as always, hashtag Charles Bots. I mean, Watts. Stay all up the arse. I couldn't even do it.